Hello and welcome back to the History of Video Games. My name is Ben. I'm joined with Wes. How are you, Wes?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. It's a nice Sunday evening. I just finished my research for 1977, so I have a list. Actually, why don't I pull up that list? I'm curious to know how many I've got.
I'm sure
before
it's
I start,
a lot.
Whittling it down a little bit. All right. Looks like I'm at 1,195 games. So.
And we're still in 77, man. That's a lot of stuff.
Well, honestly, I would say, how many of them are these first-gen consoles? It's at least 500. No, more. I'm going to say 600. So, there's probably only, I want to say 15 second-gen consoles released, throughout all of that generation. So, right. It's going to go down quite a bit, I think.
Yeah. We don't need to talk about all the AY80 or 38500s that come out in 77.
No, but I had to go through them all. So
absolutely. Yeah, yikes.
So, but it's all right. That'll be next weekend's problem. But I have the list now, so that's good. It
makes it a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah, I basically am at the point where I'm not looking anything else up. There's nothing new that's going to be added, because at this point, if I haven't already found it, it's probably from a single source and I won't include it anyway. So
right, the list is made, it is finalized.
Yep, there's a maximum of almost 1,200 games, which is good. There's no more than that. So I've been doing that. Why don't you start us off? What have you been playing, Wes?
Well, so I know last time we recorded, I was talking about Teamfight Tactics, the mode within League of Legends that's, someone described it to me almost like a deck builder, in the way that you're picking characters on your team, but then it's the auto chess genre where you just kind of plop these people down on little hex tiles, and there's sort of RNG of when they use their spells and all that, but also location can kind of dictate how the battles play out. And I remember saying that I was going to be bored with that within 3 days, and somehow I'm still playing it. It's even though I'm not getting skins for my champions, so there's no other incentive, but it's still really fun. And part of it's that I have two other friends that I'm playing with it now, or playing it with right now. So it's it's pretty fun, just kind of hang out. Nice group game where you don't have to think too much about it unless you want to be really serious and play to the meta, and you can just sort of take it easy and have a good time with it.
Nice.
So I've been doing that a bit, and that's still pretty good. But the big one that I wanted to talk about today is I finally caved and bought Escape from Tarkov, which I've been eyeing up since it entered early access in 2018, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
For the people who play a lot of games with me, they know that I love anything that's Russian post-apocalyptic genre.
Yep.
Realistic shooters, and I just learned with this game inventory management I also kind of really like. So
interesting.
Yeah, and Tarkov has all of that in it, except not really post-apocalyptic, but abandoned Russian city that a whole bunch of militia groups are fighting over. So it's got that vibe to it still, abandoned town kind of in Russia. I don't know why it's always Russia, but it is, and it's super cool. But just to give a basic, that's some of the background of it and why I was super drawn to it. But just a basic overview of the game itself. There's a town called Tarkov. You're trying to escape, sort of. But basically it's a hardcore shooter where you get dropped into rounds, which depending on the map that you've spawned in, it's 5 different maps that you can choose. It's usually a 35-minute to 25-minute time limit on how long the match lasts. And you drop in there with your main character, whatever gear you have stored in your stash, which exists outside of all of the rounds that you go into, and you gather what you can. You have to get to an extraction point without dying, and if you do die during the raid, you lose everything that you had on you, which is persistent for everything that your character owned before he went into the raid anyway. So it's super hardcore in a way that's equally frustrating and fun, and you have to kind of toe the line and balance between, I could bring my best gun into this raid, but if I die I lose my best gun. But then it's if I bring my worst gun into the raid, I'm gonna die, so I'm not gonna get any better guns. And so it's a fun almost resource management if you want to think of it that way. But the other limitation when I was talking about inventory management is, of course, you have like different size backpacks and chest gear and stuff like that that you can wear that has different equipment slots. So you're limited to what you can loot during the raid. But also for your stash, which is outside of all the raids, you have a very limited amount of space that you can actually like keep your best gear in. Which that's the big frustrating part for me right now. That's a little bit less fun, although it is kind of, it's nice to have some reason not to just like hoard everything, to have to kind of sell and get rid of stuff. It's good to have that sort of incentive, because I'm definitely a hoarder in all those games. I would keep like every single $2 gun that they gave me and sell it until I was a millionaire, instead of just like going for high value items. But that is something that you can actually work for in the game to get a larger stash size. So it's nice that you have that, because when it first released, it was just like this $140 version of the game that got the biggest stash size.
Oh no.
I mean, it kind of makes sense from a marketing perspective why they did that, but it's like, it's a brutal thing to limit.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I got in it at the point where, like, even though it's going to take me a long time, there is at least like a goal in sight of being able to upgrade my stash size. And also there's this horrible thing that you can do where you can just put backpacks that are the same size inside other backpacks. So like all of my backpacks are stored inside one backpack in my storage space, and organizing items in that is a nightmare, because I have to like hit right click open like 10 times to open every single backpack, and then I'm like, oh, there's where I stored the bullets for this one gun that I need. So there's a lot of good and bad about it, but right now I'm still like just loving every moment of it, even when I get headshot, even though I'm wearing like a helmet and this guy just has armor piercing bullets, so I have no idea what happened, and he doesn't even which does happen. There's like different tiers of bullets for each gun, but it's fun. There's just a lot of nuance to it, and a lot of, if you're feeling like really try hard shooter, it's a good one to go for.
I can tell it's like right down your alley.
Yeah.
It has like a roguelike kind of sound about it.
It does, yeah, because you're basically, if you're doing runs to unlock stuff that helps you in other runs in the future, which is like one of the central themes of roguelikes, I feel like. So it definitely has that. Mm-hmm. And then you just slap like realistic shooter and Russian genre on it, and it's like that game was made for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what I've been up to. That's probably what I'm going to do after this, because I'm loving it. What about you? What have you been playing recently?
Kind of more of the same. Been playing a lot of StarCraft still. Not doing as well as I was, but it happens. And I was playing City Skylines for a bit yesterday, though.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you know that one too well, but it's basically like a Sim City or something.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I was playing it for like a couple hours, and I kind of like built up a small town, and I was like, "Is this it? You know, like what else am I really doing?" So I don't know if I'm gonna go back, but it was fun. But I just feel like you kind of build your, industrial section, your residential, commercial section of your city, and then it's like, okay, it's all built. It's like working good. It's got healthcare. It's got education, and then it's like, well, I guess I build another one now.
Right.
It's like,
right.
I don't really know what the end goal really is.
Yeah, but, and I guess I could see how there would be some additional challenges that would like arise after having multiple cities or like a larger city. But I guess if you get it to work once and you're like, I could probably get it to work again pretty easily, it's like, what's my drive here?
Well, it just feels like, what's the drive to even get a bigger city? Like, this one's fine.
Right, and, like my people are happy.
Yeah, I mean, compared to like Zoo Tycoon, like there's a new animal that I don't have in the zoo. That's a reason to keep building the zoo, right? But in this city game, there's not really another reason to build another residential district. It's going to look just like the last one,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like the commercial zones, they do have a little bit of difference. Like you can have an office kind of space instead of factories. You can have, I think, like forestry and stuff. But I don't know. I'm just wasn't very interested in continuing, to be honest. So I don't know. It's not like it's a bad game or anything, but
right, just not really what you're feeling.
Yeah, I just kind of feel like there's not really enough incentive to go to the late game. You're not versing anybody. Like in Civilization, you're versing people, so that's kind of a reason to keep going. Or
like research tiers too, which is like a real Civ thing. Kind of makes sense because it's like, oh, I built all this, but now I have to build better versions of all of it, or else I can't keep up. There's like that kind of incentive.
Yeah, like they have like the unlocks for the later stages of the game, or like now I can build a baseball stadium, but it's like it doesn't really do anything, it just kind of is there. And I have like an opera house, so they kind of look kind of similar.
Right.
So I don't know. I was just kind of a little disappointed with the end game, I thought. And I don't know, I just kind of wish there was more variety in what you could do. Maybe you could even just unlocking buildings that look different, or like different styles of building or something. I don't know, but yeah, so I don't know. I was playing that a little bit. I was feeling like I wanted to play something sandboxy, I think. And I still have it installed from way back.
Right.
So I gave it a go. I thought there would be a lot more workshop content I was going to check out, but there wasn't that much, honestly. I don't know if maybe its user base has died off a little bit. I feel like I still see quite a bit of like YouTube videos on it. But yeah, I don't know. So
yeah,
probably not the greatest sell for other people, but
it did have an expansion like 2 years ago, I think, too.
Yeah, I think there are a couple expansions that I don't have, so maybe that adds a lot. I don't know.
Might have helped out to it, yeah. But if the base game's like not pulling you in, it's not really a good motivator to buy all the expansions for it.
Yeah, like even in Planet Coaster, if you spend a lot of time doing like little scenery and putting like little rocks places and stuff, the like scenery value on rides would go up and more people would ride them, kind of. But in this game, it's like if I spend a lot of time making like a little park and adding a whole bunch of trees and rocks and stuff, it's like nobody cares. Nothing happens or changes. So
right. It's not
as far as I can tell.
Happiness value goes up and therefore they produce more income or something like that. It's
right.
Like, interesting.
I don't know. Yeah.
It sounds like you need to dig into your computer and see if you still have OpenTTD on there.
Oh yeah, I should check that out.
Which
or, what was the one you were playing? Factorio. Could play that.
I wanted to play Satisfactory. I never ended up getting it though.
Oh right.
Because it's only on Epic Game Store, I think, which I'm not hugely against, but I haven't actually played it yet. But it looks really fun.
Mm-hmm. I might play RimWorld again. That's another kind of sandboxy thing. But yeah, that'll be for later. Why don't we move into our special topic?
Yeah.
This one, I hope it's not going to be too ranty. But basically, today I was wrapping up research, which took like all morning, and I was able to successfully do that. But part of my ending of research is I do what's called general research, which is where I just go into YouTube or Google, and I'm just kind of like video games of 77, or history of, 77 or whatever, just to try to visit sites that I haven't visited before. And, just kind of like there's a lot of websites that will do like the top 10 games or something of 77. I just want to make sure that they're all there, right? So even though I feel pretty good about the list beforehand, I just do that. But part of that was I went into YouTube and did it. And I was watching a lot of people's videos on early history video game stuff. 77, I think, is a good place where a lot of people start because, as we'll get to next year, the Atari 2600 comes out. And for a lot of people, that's like where they start. So I was watching a lot of stuff, and some of it was professional documentaries. There's one that Tony Hawk did for some weird reason.
Really? Dude, that's kind of awesome, though.
Yeah. He doesn't have like a good narration voice, but it was all right. But from that all the way to like, the guy sitting in his basement looking at his webcam talking about stuff.
Right.
And everything in between. So,
which is us, but we don't have webcams.
Right. But I was watching all this stuff, and there's a couple like things that kept popping up between some of the videos, like some inconsistencies from like what is actually happening. Even in the bigger documentaries, like there was one where they were talking about Pong, the original arcade machine game, and they had like someone in the interview like say, "Oh, before Pong, there's no place to play games unless you were like playing on a mainframe computer." And I was like, what about like Space War? Like,
Right.
Like, it's a pretty big one, and they worked on it, you know? Like, how could you not know that? But, you know, little things aside, there's like a couple bigger issues that popped up mainly in the smaller YouTube kind of area, because for the larger documentaries, they really don't have time to get into the nitty gritty, whereas as the YouTubers, they have a little bit more time to do that. But there's a couple things that people kept bringing up that I was like, this is not really what happened. So I thought maybe this is something a lot of people just kind of assume or don't know. Maybe we should talk about it, just set the record straight. I hope I'm not like blowing air up my own butt too much here, but
well, I think a lot of people don't either have the format or they didn't want to do a podcast the way that you and I are doing it, where, you know, it's very, very in depth. So it almost makes me wonder if when you're making, you know, for a YouTube kind of format, you're like, okay, let me make this short video that's also informational. You kind of get some generalizations in there, make some mistakes. I mean, that could be part of it as well.
Yeah. But anyway, there's a couple of things that kept popping up, and I thought maybe we should address them. The number one thing, and this one bugged me the most of anything, is, as we'll see in 77, there's going to be a video game crash. We'll get into it more later. But I think both you and I understand that there's a lot of consoles coming out right now. Like I said, there's probably 600 on my list, 500 just for 77.
Right.
And there was quite a lot for 76 too. So, you know, having all of these consoles come out at the same time with basically the same games and expect to make money is not really going to happen, you know? So a lot of people talk about that, and they talk about, you know, why all these companies failed. And most YouTubers seem to put the blame on Atari. They say Atari came out with Home Pong, it did really, really well, and everybody wanted to follow that. And so it's kind of Atari's fault that this happened. And I 100% disagree with that. I do have an idea of what caused the crash and what caused all these little companies to join, even the big companies. Do you have any idea what I'm thinking of, Wes?
You know, I'm blanking on it now. Why don't you let me know?
That's all right. See, maybe, you know, it's people don't think about it right away. I mean, I've had time to think about it. But
ooh, unless it's the AY 38500.
You got it, Wes. That's it. I mean, when you look at it, I really think it's Colco that is the reason why this happened. You know, they came out with the Telstar, which was basically using a chip that was super cheap, required very little knowledge in order to use it, and just kind of opened the floodgates for anybody to start making consoles. Because the original Atari Home Pong system, I believe, still used discrete components and might have used Atari's own chip that they made or licensed from somebody. But, you know, an average person wouldn't be able to get in there and like re-engineer that, you know? Right. But an average person could just go to, what was it, General Instruments or whoever made that chip, and just buy one and plug, you know, the little cables in where they needed, and they were good. So really, it's the AUI 38500 chip. That's the majority of consoles on my list. That's what the chip they use. Sometimes they use some of the other chips, but it's essentially the Pong on the chip, which is the reason for this big bubble and crash. So Atari really didn't have anything to do with it. It was really the success of the Colco Telstar, because that one, if you remember, also sold like millions. It did really, really well.
Right, yeah.
And so everybody just bought the same chip and tried to do the same thing with no basically changes. So yeah, it's not Atari's fault, people.
I can get it from the perspective of like, okay, Atari's popularizing that genre in a home console, but then why is it their fault that other companies are like, yeah, I can do that too, and then the market gets saturated? Like, I don't know. I'm not a super well informed on microeconomics, if that's exactly what it would be, but I kind of agree with you where it's like, okay, the capability for everybody to make this product is out. People know that there is, or at least they think there's a desire there, and then it's just like so much that nobody wants to buy it.
Yeah, I think people think, you know, the success of Home Pong was the reason why so many people jumped in on the market. And if you're looking just very quickly at the numbers, you see like, oh, this is Atari, this is a Pong, like there's big names there. They sold a lot of units. Like, it kind of makes sense if you're quickly looking, I think, to think like, oh yeah, they're the ones that led this. but they weren't. It was really Colco and the Telstar that did that. So I don't know if I really want to blame Colco either. I think they were very smart and hopped on this. Now, should they have made another 15 consoles after this that all use the same chip? No. But, to put it on Atari, I don't think is very fair. So, and I've seen quite a few people say that. So I wanted to clear that up. That's one of the things. Kind of going with that, a lot of people think that first generation consoles are basically just different versions of Pong. And I understand that again, because a lot of them are, especially, the AY3 8500, that's a bunch of Pong games, and that's what most of the consoles are. But there are some unique differences. I mean, the Odyssey was super unique in how it did stuff. There's a bunch of consoles that came out even before Home Pong that did things a little differently. We've seen race car games on consoles. We've seen now like timing based games. I mean, tons of different little things, chase games. So
right. And if you count all the things on the original Odyssey as well, I mean, sure, it's the paddles and a ball, but just the different ways to use it. It's not just like Pong copy straight up.
Yeah. I mean, even stuff that was similar to Pong, like I forget which one. I think it was called the Videotronic by Alpha. But that one, it came out, it was like, had the square lines that were vertical for one player and horizontal for another, so you could tell.
Right.
I mean, it is Pong, but I feel like there are so many little differences and so many little innovations that each console made along the way that you can't just say that they're all just copies of Pong. I mean, they're too different, in my opinion, to generalize to that point. I think each one does something a little bit special, and they all might be kind of related. But especially like the racing games that we've seen, I forget which one that was on, but the URL Indy 500, I mean, it's so different and felt like it was almost as good as the arcade version. So, and that was a first generation console, so you can't just say that they're all the same. I don't know. Maybe that just bugged me a little bit, but especially because we've gone through them all, so I know how many differences there are.
Right, we know it a lot better because we're going through with a microscope,
Yeah. So there's gems throughout, and to say that everything's just a plain copy and that there's nothing there, that's not the case. Similarly, on the arcade side of things, people seem to have the assumption that when you walk into an arcade, you only see Pong clones. There's, I think, a big, especially if you're looking at this from a video game point of view, like on the video game side, you might be kind of correct to some degree, especially in the earlier 70s. But I think you have to realize that the arcades at the time are not just video games. Like, there's tons of pinball machines. Like, that was really big for a long time. There's tons of electromechanical games, and a lot of them actually look like really good. I mean, we've had stuff like with projectors. We've had stuff with like racing wheels. I mean, tons of weird, cool things. They had a whole genre called like wall games, which I don't really know anything about, but this was like a pretty bustling, colorful place full of tons of different games. Even if the video games weren't that different from one another, the arcades in general had a lot going on, and so a lot of people, I think, other than Pong itself, went to arcades to play a variety of games, not just video games. So it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like people think, well, we're only talking about Pong clones, so that's all that was there, but the reality is there's still a lot of older generation stuff that's very popular in this time. All right, and then one more thing I wanted to add. And this one was mainly from the bigger documentaries, the more professional ones, the ones that were on TV. There seems to be, a lot of these like high educated doctorate people in history that want to connect early history of video games to politics. And I have no idea why. I wanted to ask you about this, Wes, because I really haven't felt that in any of the games that we've played. Like, even there was an interview, I think, with maybe Nolan Bushnell or somebody, and he was like, yeah, video games are related to like the feminist movement because Pong was really good for people that had little hands, and women have little hands, and so they were really good on Pong. And I'm like, this is getting to a weird territory for me. And there's this whole section about like video games with war and Vietnam and all this, and trying to get away from real life. And I'm like, I don't know if they did any of that.
Well, I might argue with you on that one. I mean, I don't know if
You think?
it's harder for us to see the connection, but just from hearing about when live TV and TV video of war was first broadcast with the Vietnam War, apparently it did have like a profound effect on people because like they'd only heard it through radios before the Vietnam War. So people were like, oh my God. And I don't know if that was in direct correlation with video game rise. Like, I feel like that's something you can't just go back and say this because of this. But
Mhm.
I would believe that it maybe played into it, or even if it didn't affect the popularity of video games, it was at least a reason or part of the reason that people would play them. I don't know. It's hard for us to say, not living in the time.
Right.
But that I could maybe see. And who knows if maybe the fact that early 70s, well, and still currently, video games is such like a man's world. Maybe it build a little bit of a feminist resistance, but not whatever the heck Bushnell was talking about, because that seems really weird. Like,
Yeah.
that's just sexism being like, yeah, women can play video games because they're tiny. It's like, what the heck are you talking about, dude?
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of weird. I don't know. I just feel like to me there's a pretty big connection between video games and like space. Like I can see that really easily,
Yes,
you know?
yeah.
With all the space games we've been playing. But like, do I see like a lot of war games come up? I really don't. I think if anything, the rise of video games is directly correlated to the rise in technology. And to me, that's different from politics. You know, maybe technology and politics are related, but like all the innovations, you know, aren't happening because Kennedy's doing some speech on video games, you know, like they're happening because of technology, in my opinion. So I
Right.
just don't see them being that related.
Yeah, I can understand that too. And from a documentary perspective, I'm sure it helps for storytelling to have something like that, even if there's not direct ties you can make, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. There was maybe 2 or 3 documentaries I watched that tried to push that angle of it, and I just don't know if there's an angle there. I mean, maybe you could argue for it, but that's not what I've played. Like we haven't really played any political games, right? There was that one Watergate game that
Right.
we don't think was even released. But other than that, I mean, everything's been pretty self-contained, I think. So, at least from my point of view. So yeah, those were a couple of things that you know people talked about in their videos and then the documentaries that I was like, I don't know if I agree there. You know,
Right.
there's always like little facts and things that they would throw out that I think that I knew were wrong, but from video to video, these kind of ideas kept coming up. So people like blaming Atari, I don't know, that was one thing. And I think just generalizations about how same everything was, because when you look at a list of 1,000 games, you know the chances of you actually going through them is pretty small. So
Right.
I'm sure a lot of people just kind of generalized it, but I think it's somewhat to a fault. You know, like they're missing things by not at least going a little bit further. So yeah, hopefully you know games like our list of games that we've covered and some other people that do know what they're doing and are really good, they can bring out some of the good games that have been missed, and people might be able to remember that next time. But I thought while I was researching today and had all these things on my mind, I'd rant about them a little bit. So I hope that wasn't too bad.
No,
And
It's a very interesting rant. It gives a good perspective on how our version of covering the history of video games is different than a lot of the stuff that's come before.
yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's take a little break and then move right into the timeline.
All right. everybody, welcome back. Let's get straight into our timeline for today. To start off, we are going to talk about an honorable mention for the Creative Computing 76 November and December issue. Featured games like Lem by Bill Cotter, which was basically a lunar lander clone that had an adjustable difficulty. And next up, we have 2 to 10, which was a blackjack sort of game, but the bust number, like 21, changes randomly every game, and you don't know what it is, which sounds very strange to me, but I guess it's sort of a mathematical kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
But you get a message when you are about 85% of the way there, and you have to try and calculate how far to keep going. Which, I don't know if that used like large numbers too, like if you could get up into the hundreds or what the deal was, but it seems interesting.
Yeah, I feel like you could definitely get into the high tens, so
right.
It probably would have been, I have no idea how fun that would be. It doesn't sound that fun to be honest. But moving on from there, we're going into the People's Computer Company, different magazine, their November-December issue. They actually didn't have an issue in October, which is why we haven't talked to them in a while. But this one included just one game called Frogs by Mac Oglesby, the man. We've seen a million times, but it's similar to that peg game that sometimes they have at like old school diners and restaurants where you kind of hop pegs over one another.
Right.
But in that game, I think whenever you hop over someone, you take away the peg. This one, essentially, there's all the pegs on the grid or whatever, except for one. There's a one blank empty space, and you just are trying to like move and rearrange the pegs using that one empty space until the board is in a different position that you're trying to get to. So, yeah, I don't think that's that good either. But moving on, we got one more honorable mention here. This one is called Video Pool, aka US Billiards by US Billiards, which came out November of 1976. This was a video pool game. We don't have really any video or emulation of it, but the flyers look really nice. You can definitely tell it's a pool game similar to what you would imagine a video game version of pool would look like today. So,
wow.
Actually, it's not the first pool game. I don't remember if you remember, Wes, but there's a pool game that came out way back, maybe in like the 60s or something.
Wow.
Well, that we covered on our first episode, I think. That wasn't quite as nice as this, probably, but I think this one's definitely reminiscent of that one. So,
right.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, I thought.
Nice. And next up, we get the first game question mark that I got to take a more in-depth look at, and that
I'm so excited.
Ben knows what's coming, but what I took a look at was Little Professor by Texas Instruments. Came out in 76. Texas Instruments, the calculator people, and this is a calculator, but it's oh so much more.
Well, they came out with a Pong on a chip, I think, right, too. So they are like...
That's true.
In that gray area right now, I think.
Right, where they don't know exactly where they want to go, but this is kind of in line with what you might expect from TI now, with like the TI-83s and all that. Just some basic history for this. It's considered to be the first electronic educational toy. Don't know how debatable that is, but it makes a lot of sense for this one. One of the designers of the second generation of the Little Professor stated that this was the highlight of his career. Which, as I talk about the Little Professor a little bit more and how much I'm not that big of a fan of it, you might get why I put that in there, because if he liked it, I mean, I don't want to make fun of this guy's career, but that statement coming from my point of view seemed kind of funny. And the whole body of this calculator, the whole face of it, where the keys are, is like this cartoony kind of weird professor that has a white mustache. It almost looks like a white mustache haired version of the Sonic villain, Robotnik.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. So imagine that staring at you through the numbers of your calculator while you're trying to type on it, and that's basically what this is. But the calculator itself is just a regular calculator, except instead of you typing in addition or multiplication to get the answer, it prompts you with math problems that you have to solve. It really rides the border of being a game for me. It does keep score of how many questions you get right out of 10, but that's kind of it as far as like a scoring system. There's not too much gameplay going on.
It has difficulty, right?
It does have difficulty, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so
and
that's all you need. No.
you, you can get a question wrong 3 times, and then it gives you the answer. But I don't think
No.
there's any consequences other than your score going down. And it did have 4 difficulty levels, and also the option to do either addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division problems. Doesn't mix them all up. You can only do one of those at a time. And yeah, so that's kind of the basic theme of it. Let me get right into my ratings for this. For graphics, I gave it a 1 out of 10, which may even be a little bit generous. Basically, it's just an LED display of numbers. A bunch of capital E's show up on the screen whenever you get a question wrong, so there's that. But other than that, it's just, the operators, like the addition sign, the minus sign, multiplication, and then numbers. And that's basically it. There's newer digital versions of this today that have like a little mustache and eyeballs and glasses for the professor at the side of the screen, and he reacts whenever you get a question right or wrong, which makes me kind of uncomfortable. But thankfully, that wasn't on this one. It's just the LED display. For sound, I gave it a 0 out of 10. There's no sound.
Oh, they could have done something there.
They could have done something, yeah. I guess calculator first is kind of what they were thinking. For gameplay, I'd give my strangest score ever a 0.5 out of 10. I don't know if you can really call it gameplay. You're answering math questions. There's no like overarching goal or game elements except for the score at the end. I like the idea of this as like a fun educational tool, but if I was looking for a fun way to kill some time, I would not touch this. It would not enter my mind.
I don't know if I'm preempting anything, but we've played a lot of math games like Wumpus or something, Like
Right.
how is it? Is Wumpus like you've got some lore there, you've got a little bit more text, and that's kind of makes it into a game, or like
For me, yeah. And I mean, it gets a little muddy. I mean, because there's some things that I would call a game that other people might consider like the same as this. So at some point, I think there's a little bit of a personal definition for it.
Mhm.
But for me, it's just like there's no goal other than get as many questions right as possible and like learn. But there's not even like theming of like, I want to make, I want to impress the professor, or like, I don't know.
You want to catch the Wumpus, there's nothing like that.
Right, exactly. You're not shooting the arrow, hunting the poor Wumpus.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's just like there's nothing to really tie me to it to make it any more than just like a answering math questions kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for my relevance for this, I did give it a 6 out of 10. It's the first electronic educational toy, which I think is pretty relevant, but maybe not so much to game history so much as just like relevant in general. I do think that anything that's really like starting to merge education and gaming in the early days is pretty cool. But for me, it didn't have enough of the game side of it for me to say like, yeah, this is super relevant for gaming history specifically. So overall, I gave it a 1 out of 10. Pick up a copy of this if you want to teach yourself some math problems in a weird, like kind of cutesy theme. But if you're looking for a fun math video game, this wouldn't be my recommendation. I'm hoping that maybe we see some cool math video games coming out in the coming years, but if not, in the late 80s and early 90s, we have Math Blasters coming, which I can confirm is a good game because I played it in school.
I played when I was really young. I have no idea what this is called, but there was like a frog game I played. It had a whole story mode. It had math. It had like language arts. It had a bunch of stuff. And I remember having so much fun with it, honestly. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah. So we've seen it can be done like
it
well.
can be done.
But this one doesn't do it, I don't think.
Well, it's interesting because when I was getting ready to give it to you, I found quite a few videos, and the people in it were like, I love this thing. And I'm like, wow. It definitely was part of some people's childhoods. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, no, I think it was important to people. Just for me, I'm drawing the line of whether it was like important from a game perspective.
Right. From a historical, it's like,
Yeah, and you did ask me too when I was reviewing this how I would compare it to like similar LED handheld electronics of the time, like Auto Race by Mattel that we just talked about. And for me, the main difference there is what I call like gameplay. I feel like Little Professor is missing, even though like quote unquote video games is also a little debatable when you're talking about like an LED display. Some people might say that's just sort of electromechanical almost, or like just like a since it's just lights lighting up. For me, I still consider that sort of video game, but Auto Race has that theme of racing, whereas there's just Little Professor is less education and enjoyment and more like education and here's like a little face to distract you that you're learning kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's my overall take on Little Professor. I think as a piece, it is cool. As a game, I do not like it.
Yeah. And I do want to mention there were games before the Mattel games that we covered that were handhelds that had come out, but they were more along this sort of vein, but without even a Little Professor theme, you know, so I didn't feel the need to cover them, but this one I thought was kind of cool. And if you guys know Number File, the YouTube channel, which is a very big channel and one that I watch, they've talked about it several times on there, so I was like, you know what, we should probably cover this, and it'd be good to give it to Wes, because I want to make him suffer.
No, it was a fun one to take a look at, whether I trashed it or not.
Yeah, so, debatable handheld, we'll say.
Yes, yeah.
But that's going to move us right along to the first one I rated, called Fonz by Sega. And yes, it is that Fonz. This is a re-release of their motocross game with the Fonz branding, which I guess they got licensed for from the Happy Days TV show, which I looked up, and it was actually the arcade machine was released between seasons 3 and 4. So
okay,
came out in November or December of 1976. So I'm assuming it's probably right in their prime time of being popular. So this one, I just want to say right away, I didn't really have a lot to go off here. There's only one video of this that exists that I could find on YouTube, and it's only a minute long and it has no sound. So, and even in the description, the guy said that the acceleration wasn't working correctly. So, you know, I don't really know that much about this game, but I really wanted to cover it because it's a continuation of this whole series of games that we have not been able to rate, which has been the Sega racing games. Because, you know, Taito had the speed race stuff that we have been able to cover, but I think Sega kind of had this whole line of rival games, and none of them we've been able to play or even look at. You know, they've all been lost.
Right.
It started with Road Race, which came out, I think, this year, and then Motocross, Man TT, like a bunch of these ones, and we've been able to mention them as honorable mentions, but up until this point, we haven't had any video of any of them. And I was like, you know, even if I can't give the best review, I kind of want to give this something, you know, a deeper look.
Yeah.
So,
and a fun chance to get take a look at something that Sega's done too, which we don't get to do that often.
Yeah, and you know, because for a while they were only making like light gun games and stuff.
Right.
So
exactly.
this is like a real video game. It's a racing game. They're, I think, answer to Taito's speed race games. So I kind of wanted to get into it and describe at least what I could tell and see. So how this game works is another racing game. It does use scrolling graphics, but it's kind of like a combination of speed race and like highway. And highway, you know, we don't have that great of an opinion on, but speed race is definitely cool. But I think the biggest advantage of this game is the camera is in a chase cam view or an isometric view, and that's really cool. You know, you're seeing kind of the back of the vehicle. In this case, everybody's on motorcycles. There's really only you and one other motorcycle that spawns at any one time, so it's really only 2 sprites on the screen. So I really like that. I like the scrolling graphics. They do a really weird thing where the track spawns in ahead of you and you can kind of see it move and turn really fast, and that's kind of cool. The problem is you're not really in charge of the acceleration or the movement of the motorcycle on the track. It really feels like you're on rails, and then you're kind of moving up, down, left, right in a box, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
So if I didn't press any buttons on my controller, I think the motorcycle would just stand there in the middle, and even if there was a right turn coming up, he would just kind of turn right by himself and always be in the middle of the track at all times. So you're not really controlling the speed that you go through the track. You're not really controlling turning on the track. You're really just kind of dodging the car left or right and making sure that you don't go off the road, because I think the track's a little bit smaller than what you can move. So that's really the whole game. And it's not that much racing, in my opinion. There's also like a weird problem that happens. I'll kind of get into my graphics rating here. I gave it a 2 out of 10 for graphics. The motorcycle looks really nice, I think, and the motorcycle that spawns in that tries to crash into you definitely looks a little bit different and also looks quite nice. The scrolling graphics look nice. The street looks good. It is black and white, and there's nothing on the sides where the grass is, it's just kind of a gray background. But the thing that really kind of is weird about this is because since you're on rails, sometimes it'll purposely slow down the entire track and then have a biker spawn from behind you to kind of give some difference in gameplay. But it feels really weird that, like, I didn't press anything to slow down or decelerate, and the track is suddenly moving slower.
Right.
So that's kind of weird, and it's kind of weird how the track spawns in, but it doesn't really ever feel like you ever are turning. It's not like you ever get a sideways view of the motorcycle or anything like that. So, I don't know, it just is, there's a couple of weird things about it that doesn't look quite right. And sometimes the scrolling it's not constant, and because you're not controlling your own speed with it, when it moves and changes by itself, it's like, why is this happening, So there's just some weird things going on, and it doesn't quite look right, in my opinion. For gameplay, I gave it just 2 out of 10. Because you're not controlling the racing yourself, yeah, I feel like it loses a lot. I think if this had no cars on the road and you were just turning with the track, I think it would have been a much better game. That would have been more reminiscent of Night Racer,
Right.
which we've played, and or was it Night Driver?
I think Night Driver is what it's called.
Night Driver. And I think that would have been a much better game. But yeah, I don't know. They kind of tried to do a little bit of both, I think, and it didn't quite work, in my opinion. For sound, like I said, the video had no sound, so I just had to give that an NA. I did read in the comments that people seem to have the impression that it did have very good sound and maybe even some music to it. I can't imagine it had like great music, but maybe something similar to the little jingles that we've heard in like Steeplechase, for instance.
Right.
So I just had to give that an NA. Unfortunately, there's no video or emulation that I could find that had sound, so I just had to give that. And then for relevance, I gave it a 7 out of 10, and this is kind of like me combining all those old games too.
Right.
That's Road Race, that's NTT Motocross. Obviously this sold well because this is their 4th iteration at least, and they were able to license it with somebody else. I should mention, by the way, that nothing has changed about the game in this Fonz version other than the cabinet art, which did look very Fonzy, so
Nice.
I guess if you're a big fan of the Fonz, you might really enjoy this, but the gameplay is, and all the graphics are straight rip-offs from Motocross. And I believe Man TT was like maybe the US release or something like that, so they're all the same. So I wanted to give it a high relevance because it's Sega. They're doing some unique original work here. Like I said, it's not like the best, but I do think it's their answer to Taito's Speed Race games. And while it has a lot to go, like the camera is good. I really like what they were doing with that. It does have scrolling graphics. It does have some nice sprites. It does have when you go off the grass and stuff, the screen flickers. Your car or your motorcycle kind of slows down a little bit, goes to the bottom, and it'll kind of automatically go back towards the middle. But it has some good ideas there. But I think where they were really confused about what they should be doing is with the actual racing game mechanic and how that plays in with the scrolling graphics and being able to look at the track ahead of time. I feel like this game and Night Driver both had a very similar issue they had to overcome, and Night Driver was able to figure it out, and this game is still trying. So yeah, it's not the best, but I wanted to cover it because Sega has been doing a couple of these, and we haven't been able to cover any of them.
Right.
So this is the first chance that we got to maybe do it, and I didn't want to miss that. So yeah, the Fonz, everybody, by Sega.
Nothing else cool for the fact that we're seeing more and more like licensed sort of other properties being brought into video games. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know if we have seen any other licensed properties. I think most of them that we've seen have been more unlicensed.
That's true, like all the Star Trek
versions.
ones.
Yeah, like a lot of the Star Trek. So yeah, it's a little bit different, and I have no idea how Sega managed that. There's some like kind of somewhat obscure Japanese company.
Right, yeah.
But you know what? They probably paid a lot of money, and I hope it worked well for them. But it must have done pretty well because obviously they've already ported it and kind of re-released it. I think Man TT had Midway's help releasing it in the US, so it obviously must have done pretty well, despite the fact that we can't find much evidence of it today. So,
right.
But yeah, and I think that'll do it for arcade machines today. We have a little bit of a shorter one, just because we're getting close to the end of the year here, and I had to kind of break them up in a weird way, the games that we've got left. But Wes, you're going to move us right along into our first console of the day.
Yes, yeah, and it's one that we have been waiting for, and we are always waiting to see more from Odyssey.
Oh, yeah. And this one, honestly, Wes, I'm a little excited about this one.
Yeah,
and maybe you're not, but I'm pretty excited about this.
I am excited. You'll see my reasoning for why I was talking a little down on it earlier, but yes, it's definitely, this is one it's worth getting excited about. It's the Odyssey 500 by Magnavox, came out in '76, and it is basically meant to be an improvement or a better version of the Odyssey 400. One of the big differences that this one has, big improvements, is it has color, which is huge. And in consoles, we're like, yes, all consoles should have color now, please. It basically, as far as the console itself, looks identical to the Odyssey 400, except it was black instead of white, and it added color to the screens. 3 different sprites for each side, so I don't know if you technically count that as 6 because they were facing different directions, and also 3 different courts or fields that you could play on. It was advertised as playing tennis, smash, which is like handball, hockey, and soccer, but interestingly, the soccer game is just using the sprites from Smash on the hockey playing field. So they kind of were like, yeah, but I mean, it's like you're using a different playing field and your character looks different, so now it's a different game, which we've seen before with these consoles, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But getting into the gameplay of it, tennis, smash, and hockey are all played like the typical Odyssey variants of these games. You can move vertically and horizontally, you can cross over the net in tennis. Most importantly, you can put the English on it, which, of course...
Hell yeah.
In the video that I saw when I was watching this, there was 2 people playing it, and they were speaking another language, but it sounded like each one of them was very annoyed when someone got a score when someone put the English on it, which is basically exactly what I expect and exactly what we want out of it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the ball's going like doing a parabola, like looping up and down like 3 times and then just ducking under the other person's sprite. And another interesting thing that was pointed out in the Wikipedia article for this is that there are technically like other quote-unquote game modes too, because you could use any of the sprites on any of the other fields. You know, of course, that doesn't really make the game different, but you could use the tennis sprites on the hockey field, for instance, and wouldn't really be a different game, but you'd have this weird thing where tennis players are trying to hit it into a goal on the other side of the wall. And just to go over the fields really quickly, tennis was just a line in the middle that the ball and the characters could go over. Hockey was 2 walls on either side with a goal, a gap in the middle that was the goal. And then Smash was just the solid wall. So it was like typical handball kind of game.
Did they all have different like colors on them?
I don't see. One of the videos showed that they had different colors, but the video was also really bad quality, so I couldn't tell. I think this console only had 3 colors, so I think it would have rotated between the 3 different colors, the orange, teal, and the dark blue that were available. But I could be wrong about that. The only one that I got like definitive, like, okay, I know that this is how it looked, was tennis, which had a dark blue background, a teal wall. One of the players was teal, and then one of the players was orange. In the other video, it did look like there was an orange background at one point when they were playing maybe hockey, but I'm not too sure exactly what caused that. But if it did have that, that would be pretty cool.
I'm looking at a couple of images now, and actually it looks like you were mentioning, you can, how you said you can change the player sprites on different things. It looks like you can change the number of goals on different colored backgrounds, is my guess. But it looks like they did have a green one, a blue one, an orange one, and then a black one, which says soccer.
Oh, okay. So you did have some. Have some variation there.
You could play on 4 different colors essentially, and I guess try to make more lore sense if you're playing the blue one for hockey and stuff, but I don't know.
Right. Yeah, or just, simple color variation. But yeah, it does help to at least make it, more options are always good with these consoles, especially when it's a color. Like, just the more that you can do is awesome.
Mhm.
And then also, just another small thing, you did have the option to move the walls around on the screen. They could kind of go like further apart if it was one with two walls, or you could just move the smash wall like really, really close to the goal if you wanted to.
Nice.
So for my ratings for this, for the graphics, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. The graphics are probably the like highlight of the system for me. It was in color. There was two different colored players, and also the ball would change color whenever a player, or to match whichever player hit it last, which is really cool. And it also looked like that would really help you know when to put the English on it, because I feel like a lot of the times, like, if you're not paying attention to who hit it last, you don't really know. But then you're like, oh, it's the same color as me. Now I can really mess with my opponent and get it to go past them. So,
Right, especially in squash, probably, or smash, I guess.
yes, yeah, because then you're both on the same side, and it gives you a better idea, and it just sort of like helps you understand how to play the game a little better, because you're like, okay, now I hit the ball, now this person hit the ball. So even that small thing, I think, was a really nice addition. There was also on-screen scoring that was color-coded for each player that showed up on each side of the screen, and it only showed up after you scored a point, which we always like, and it was huge, which is also good, as long as it's not on the screen the whole time.
Mhm.
The sprites themselves are pretty cool. I think they're really, really good for a console of the time. Comparing them to arcade cabinets of the time, they're still a little bit lacking, but you can definitely tell what all of them are, and they look pretty cool. The hockey and tennis sprites are really good, like chunky, blocky sort of renditions of like tennis is a guy sort of mid-run with a racket in his hand, which is just like this little square thing he's holding. And then hockey, he's leaning over a hockey stick, but both of them you can definitely tell what's going on. The smash slash soccer sprite was kind of weird. It just looks like a dude like T-posing, but I guess it's handball. You hit it with your hand. For some reason, I keep thinking of like squash, where you have a racket whenever we're talking about handball.
Mhm.
In this version, I guess he doesn't, and it does also make it make sense for soccer, because it's just bouncing anywhere off your body, but you can imagine that it's your guy kicking it. So that one was a little weird, just the strange T-posing dude. You can tell it's a guy, but you can't really tell much else. There's a hole in the center of his head, which could be his mouth or maybe his neck's detached. I didn't really know what was going on there. And for the sound for this, I gave it a 1 out of 10. As far as I could tell from the videos I watched, there was only one sound in the game, and it was the same standard Odyssey ball bounce that we've been hearing for years. So, unfortunately, nothing special going on there. The gameplay, though, I did give it a 1.5 out of 10, a little bit low. I always like the quirkiness of traditional Odyssey gameplay, but I feel like all the improvements to gameplay in this console are so tied to graphics. Basically, everything's the same as all the other Odyssey consoles. All the elements of the system that I feel like benefited the gameplay, I feel like were more related to the graphics side of things, like the sprites to help you know which game you're playing and all that kind of stuff, and also the changing ball color depending on who hits it. Other than that, it didn't seem like this really had that many gameplay improvements over other Odyssey consoles. For relevance, I give it a 7 out of 10, because holy cow, the Odyssey has color graphics now. It's awesome.
Yep.
I also think it might be the first time we've seen like detailed sprites on a console. Maybe we did for some of the racing games as well on consoles, but I feel like a lot of what we've been seeing is just different shapes of paddles.
Mhm.
Even the Fairchild, which was pretty cool, was just like that line that could be 5 different angles, and that was kind of it.
Yeah, I had like tank ones of mine, but they did not look as good as these ones do.
That's right,
So-
that's right. And there were the tank ones in the Fairchild as well. So not the first time we've seen sprites, but definitely these are good sprites. And like, if you're going to keep doing Pong games, at least they're like, hey, this is an area where we can improve on the Pong games, and it definitely makes them better. I do think that the quality of the sprites is noticeably worse than what the cabinets had at this time, but considering it's on a console, I think they're pretty good and they really add something to the game.
Mhm.
Other than that, though, that's the main innovative and relevant factor of this. The games themselves, I mean, they're still just hockey, handball, and tennis. So for my overall rating, I gave it a 2 out of 10. I love seeing some of that Odyssey gameplay with the weird Odyssey twists, but there's not enough to make the gameplay itself feel like different than a bunch of the other Pong games that we've seen on consoles. But of course, the really exciting that this thing that this console does is all the sprites and the color that it has.
Yeah.
It's a cool one. I'm glad I got to get back into the Odyssey reviewing.
Yeah, me too. I was really happy when I saw this one because, to be honest, like the last two Odyssey releases have not been good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like the Odyssey 200 was like all right, and then they put an AY 38500 chip in one and called it the 300. And then the 400 was like worse than that one. So I was like, are they falling behind? And I think they kind of brought it back a little bit with this one. I mean, the graphics are, in my opinion, kind of like next gen with this one. Like the gameplay and stuff is lacking, obviously, but whatever technology they needed to figure out in order to make it have color and make it have sprites, like that's there now. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with it next. And the other thing I have in my notes here, I was really disappointed there was no doubles with this. Like there's only one sprite per person, and I think having two hockey dudes and being able to move them would have been really fun. But
it would have been cool. I'm guessing it was still, considering all the graphical stuff they added, it must have been limitations of the console.
Yeah, I think so. You do have to realize too, like the Fairchild, they've probably been working on that console for, over a year, and this is the third how many? This is the fifth one I think they put out this year, right?
Yeah, either fourth or fifth. Something crazy.
No, this is their third one they put out this year, but still, Magnavox they have had less development time per release, so I guess it makes sense. But yeah, I'm glad they brought it back a little bit with this one. And the one video I sent you, the guys that are speaking another language are having so much fun. And
I know, they're loving it. Yeah,
they were loving it.
I thought was awesome.
And that's going to move me to the last one that I rated today. This one is the Binatone TV Master Mark VI. And yes, it is that time. We are going to revisit the AY3 8500 and look at all of the games this time, because up until this point we've only covered versions that had like the first 4 games, which were the Pong clones. But this version has also 2 games that are light gun games, which the AY3 8500 chip could do. And the only game it doesn't have is Handicap, which I think we talked about in the previous episode. Only a couple of the consoles had that, which was basically a version where I think one person had 3 paddles on their side and the other person only had 2.
Yes,
so it was like a hockey game. But still, this one has all the other 6, and I wanted to cover one that had all of the other 6. Just so you guys know, I have seen dates for this console being in 1977, but I think it belongs in 76 because there was another version of it called the Mark IV Plus 2, which I know was in 76. So I'm pretty sure the Mark VI, which is the same chip as the 4 Plus 2 and the same games and the same peripherals, came out in 76. So I just put it at the very end of the year. But yeah, so like I mentioned, it's the AY3 8500 chip, which we've covered kind of at the beginning of this year with the Coco Telstar, and then we covered it again with the Odyssey 300. It's a pretty solid black and white, though, Pong system, and there is sound for this. It's just kind of normal Pong sounds. There is on-screen scoring, although unlike in the more recent versions of consoles, this scoring is on screen at all times, except for the shooting games, which there's no scoring for those, so it's kind of the worst version of that, I'd say.
Right.
But the graphics are very clean, and that's one of the main things about this console and about the AY3 8500 chip. How Pong works, there's something about it that's very like fluid. Everything looks really tight, really clean, and it's just kind of very easy to watch. It's definitely like not as weird as and floaty as some of the other ones I've seen, so I think that's really one of the reasons why it took off and sold really well. But let me just go through the games real fast. We've covered some of these before, but we've got tennis, which is the Pong style. We've got squash, which is a one-player versus ball game. That was actually squash solo, which is a one-player versus ball game. We've got squash, which is the two-player versus ball game. And the last person to touch it before it goes off screen gets a point. That one I think has some issues because we're in black and white. You've got 2 paddles on one side, and it's going to go through the person who hit it last. So if you kind of lose track of which paddle you are, like you're kind of, that's not great. And then in this case, you had what they called football, which was just a hockey type variant with 2 paddles per person, one on your side, one on the opponent's side. And then the 2 new ones that I got to look at were target and shooting. Target, you're able to shoot at a dot that moves across the screen and bounces off the edges. And shooting is more of your, what is it called? The clay pigeon kind of thing, or it just comes in from the left, it goes to the right, and just left to right, left to right, left to right, over and over.
Right.
So, not exactly the most interesting shooting games. Getting into what the console looks like, it's kind of a weird looking one. Again, the actual look of all these AY3-8500 chips were actually, the person who made the console was responsible for those. So all these consoles do look different and have maybe a little bit different peripherals. But for this one, it had a pretty nice looking case. It was black and had like a bright orange bottom to it and some nice color on some of the dials and stuff on the console. So I thought it looked kind of nice. It does have detachable controllers, just 2 of them. The controllers are kind of weird looking. They look like kazoos. Honestly, they have a little dial on the top that you just rotate left to right, and then I guess moves you up and down. So just a single kind of button on that sort of a dial per person, and then the peripheral for the gun. It basically looks like one of those Luger German guns.
Oh, right. Jeez.
I do think if a police officer walked in your house and you had this, they would assume it was real because of how real look it. I mean, it's obviously plastic, but yeah, they wouldn't make this today. Not fully black like it is anyway. They'd make it like bright orange or something.
Orange tip or something, yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty realistic looking, and I think looks pretty nice. In the video I watched, the guy said it was kind of not working too well, so he was like holding it right up to the screen and trying to shoot. But I imagine you could shoot from pretty far back. So yeah, I mean, it looked all right. Let's get into the ratings here, because a lot of these I feel like you guys have already heard a little bit.
Right.
For gameplay, I gave it 2.5 out of 10, which I think is the same as what we gave some of the other AY3-8500 games. It does come later, and I could have dropped it because of that, because of how few changes it made, but we've got the light gun games in this version, and while I don't think that they're great light gun games, I'd actually say maybe the Magnavox Odyssey had probably better ones, because, I mean, you had an overlay there to make it look like something. I mean, this is literally a black screen with a white box that moves. I do think, I want to say the Magnavox Odyssey, it didn't have a moving target by itself, did it? I think it maybe actually it did, but
I think, yeah, the other player did like the right to left scrolling thing. It like took over that paddle.
I see. So it had some variation of what it could do. This one, it can kind of come in from different angles and bounce off the screen in different ways, but it's just a white box on a black screen. So it's not really that impressive. I think the console really probably sold more for the Pong games, which, like I mentioned, even though they're black and white, they're very clean. They look really nice. They do have score. They do have sound, although it's just Pong sounds. So, I didn't want to give it that much for gameplay, but you do have a little bit more of a wider variety, as you did when we saw the consoles come out with this chip at the very beginning of the year. So I wanted to give it a little bit more for that. And especially because we know there's like 1,000 consoles that use this chip or whatever, you probably have a bunch of different light gun peripherals. So I bet there are people that collect just those.
Right.
Which could be fun. But for graphics, I gave it a 2 out of 10. Like I said, you got nothing really amazing here. I even lowered that a little bit from the first time we saw this console or this chip, just because by now it's kind of outdated. I mean, technology has been improving so fast. Compared to the Odyssey 500, this looks way worse, in my opinion. There's no sprites, there's no color. Like I said, it looks like a nice black and white game, but I feel that's kind of last year's news,
Right.
The more consoles that we cover, the worse this is going to look. It's just how it rolls, I guess. But I do think the Pong still holds up a little bit, even like if I look at the Fairchild's version of Pong, it had color, but it didn't look as crisp and clean as it does on this. So I had to give it a little bit there. For sound, I just gave it 1 out of 10 because we're dealing with the classic Pong sounds. There's nothing new there. Even the light gun shooting game, you get like a single Pong sound when you shoot and you hit. And I don't think it makes any sound if you miss. So it's kind of weird. And then for relevance, it's kind of a hard one to rate because obviously the AY3-8500 chip was incredibly influential, and as we mentioned in the beginning of this episode, probably led to the video game crash of 77. So obviously it did a lot. We've already covered it twice now. So for this version, I just gave 6 out of 10 because this version is really the one we're covering with the light gun games. That's kind of why I wanted to cover it. And just because it had all 6, essentially. Everything that this chip could do, other than handicap, was on this console, and we had good videos and stuff for it. But I do think it's important. I think the light gun games are important. I'm glad to see that people are still experimenting with that, because other than the Magnavox Odyssey, I don't think we've really seen it. Have we? In any other console? I don't think we've seen any other light guns.
We might not have. I mean, no, it's just the arcade cabinets that we've been seeing recently that have light guns.
Yeah, we have seen that. But as far as home consoles go, we haven't really seen it. So I'm glad that they're still doing it, though, because I do think there's a place in the market for it. So especially compared to the original AY3-8500 games that only had the Pong clones on that were released earlier, this is just a straight up upgrade.
Right.
You're getting 2 more games, you're getting a light gun. So I had to give it a little bit there. 6 out of 10. I kind of feel good about that because it's called the Binatone Mark 6. So I don't know. I was like, okay, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, it matches.
And that gives me an overall of 3 out of 10. I still think it's not that bad. It's not that great either. It just feels outdated, but it feels like a very solid entry still. Like, if there's a black and white version of Pong out there, this is the best one, in my opinion. You've got 2 more games, you've got light gun games, but compared to second gen consoles, and compared to even like the Odyssey 500 or Super Pong, does this beat those? I don't think it does. So you know what? Actually, I'm going back. I'm changing my total, Wes.
Whoa.
I know. 3 out of 10 is too high. I'm going to go down to a 2.5.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
On the chopping block.
It's just a little outdated.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. I mean, it's not a bad one. It's just technology's too fast, Wes.
Yeah, can't keep using that same chip.
But people will. Yeah, and that's going to bring us to the last honorable mention here. It is time, people. Now that we've covered the AY3-8500, it's time to go through the list of all AY3-8500 games released in 1976. I do want to mention this isn't like every single game that was on that chip. There's actually quite a few of these that had multiple releases under different names. For there was a Japanese release, a Spain release, and they had different names. If I found that information, I just took one of them that I thought was more notable for whatever reason. So you might have a console that's not on this list that came out in 76. Just like look it up. It's probably related to one of these that I'm going to say. All right, you ready, Wes?
Deep breaths. Let me know when you need me to tag in.
You have it up too?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll do a couple. All right, this is like one of the reasons why it takes so long to research people. But and the 77 list is going to be longer than this, I'm sure.
Ooh, boy.
But we've got the Coleco Telstar Classic. So they already put out a second one of the same chip. We've got TV Sports 801, aka E801 by Lloyd's. We've got the Heathkit GD 1380, Superscore VideoMaster VM8, Triple Challenge 7701 Magnavox. So Magnavox, they're still putting out stuff with this chip. Another one here, Wonder Wizard 7702 by Magnavox. The Wonder Wizard Bullseye. Like, this is why bad things are going to happen. So Magnavox actually came out with, how many is this now? 6 or 7 consoles this year, and 4 of them were with the AY3-8500 chip. So that was the Bullseye. We have the Game Attic 7706, the Game Attic 7704, the APF TV Fun models 401 and 401A, the First Dimension Video Sports model 76, which actually, I don't know if you remember, Wes, First Dimension, they had a nice console from last year, I remember.
Right. Yeah.
So they decided to throw away all that unique talent they had and just buy a chip. Similarly, we also have the Videotronic 2 by Alpha, which I mentioned Alpha earlier. They had a nice idea with theirs. They just threw that away. They went, this chip is half the price and it's pretty good, so we're just going to do that. All right, why don't you tag in, Wes?
All right. So to pick up, we got the TV scoreboard, the Radio Shack models 60-3051 and 3052, the Apollo 2001 by Enterprex, the Playtech Telesport console, Telegames Hockey Pong, both by Sears, the Telegames Hockey Tennis by Sears.
Yep.
Notable difference. The Sportsman T101 by Unisonic, the Tournament 100, 102, 150, and 200, model 2200 by Unisonic as well.
Why did they do that?
I don't know, just release like 5 things right at the same time.
Keep in mind, people, this is all off one chip.
Right.
What are they doing? I don't
They're
know.
doing 2 games per game console, probably.
With a chip that could do all 6.
Exactly. Then we have the Video Sports by Granada, the Paddle 4 and Paddle 6 by Roberts Radio, the TV Game EP460 by Mecca, and let's see, my last one for right now, Ben, to tag you back in here, is the TV Sport by Packle Instrument.
Oh, yeah. And just so you guys know, we're probably 2/3 way through this, so we still got a little bit. We got the Tournament TV Game Electronic VM8, also known as the Super Score by Princetronic. We've got TV Game EP500 by Nobility Windsor, the Videomatic 101 by Alcatel, Telematch Concert 4 by Telematch, the Video Olympiad by Federal, Granada, and Glorytone, the Occitel and OC4 by Occitane, which I think was a French company. By the way, the names of these concerts are so generic, it makes it so difficult to keep track. This one's just called the Color TV Game by Ricochet Electronics. I think I'm just going to go to the end, Wes. I'm going to push through. The Video Game TVG 5000 by BMC, the Video Sports PS1 by Venture Electronics, which I'm not sure if that's the same Venture Electronics that has made some kits that we've covered. I guess it is. I was also helped by or published by the Canadian Tire Company, which seems pretty random. Tele Multiplay by Telematch, also known as the Telematch 4 or 4400. You got the Sports King Model 101 by YSA, which I think was a Japanese company. The TV Multispiel by Universum, which whenever you see that spiel, it's like a German. And then finally, the Binatone ones that I've kept. The TV Master Mark 4, which was their just 4 games version, and the 4+2, which I know came out in 76, so why the Mark 6 wouldn't have come out in 76, I've got no clue, but they're the exact same. But I had videos for the Mark 6 and not the Mark 4+2, so I just covered them together. And that's it. So I don't know how many that is. I'm not going to count.
It's a lot. We'll get back to you at a later date with that information.
It'll be up on the website. I'll just copy paste all these. And like I said, there were definitely a lot more, but a lot of them were re-releases and just called something different. So, and obviously, especially with the AY3D 8500 consoles, there are even more that I probably only had one source for. I just found today, actually, at my 77 research, a whole website dedicated to these weird, obscure Japanese consoles, and then a separate whole website for Spanish consoles, including a bunch I had never heard of, and essentially because they didn't pop up on any of my other websites, I'm not counting them because it's just one source. But yeah, there's a lot. This is the reason why all these companies, they're not going to make any money on this because everybody's doing the same thing. And you've got stupid people like even Magnavox coming out with 4 different consoles with the same chip. What are you doing?
It's crazy.
What is this tournament 100, 102, 150, 200? Just make one. I don't understand. But I guess if you have the option of selling the same game 4 times, you go for it.
Yeah, if they think they're going to make money off it.
I should mention also, by the way, I don't know if I said this, but we mentioned one here called the Super Score by VideoMaster. VideoMaster is another one that's made quite a few unique consoles, and they're actually going to make some more in 77. So it's kind of weird to me that the big companies like Magnavox and Atari and Sears and VideoMaster are involved in this as much as the small ones. Because to me, it makes sense that the small ones would do this, but if you've got money like Colco does, which they just millions on the first one, why would you continue to sell the same thing? I don't know. It seems weird to me that companies that have the creativity and have the bank would just cash in kind of like this so early.
Right. Yeah, it seems a little strange.
I don't know. I'm sure that's going to help with the collapse, which we'll talk about later. But that'll do it for us today. A bit of a shorter one because there's kind of a weird number of games here at the end of 76. We have one more episode of 76 we're going to do. So we'll wrap it up there, and then we're off to the races for 77. And oh boy, are there lots of good games, Wes. I found out just today there is a sequel to Gunfight, and I'm like, oh, I am so in.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yes, I'm pretty excited. There was some that I saw today with crazy looking animation, stuff that we've never seen before. So, yeah, it's going to be awesome. Please stay tuned, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode.
Yeah, make sure to check us out on Twitter. Send us an email if you have any questions. And as always, keep an eye on our website if you want to look back at some of the stuff we've done before or get a little bit more info on other games that we've reviewed. Thank you so much for listening, as always, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
See you in the next one.